It doesn't matter how long it has been broken down. God can repair it and rebuild it in less time than it took for us to break it down. Would you turn your Bible or electronic device to Nehemiah chapter 3? Nehemiah chapter 3. We'll be looking at verse 1. If you don't have a Bible, if you don't have a device that has a Bible, I think it's on the screen behind me. Nehemiah chapter 3, verse 1. It reads, "The high priest Eliashib and his fellow priests began rebuilding the sheep gate. They dedicated it and installed its doors. After building the wall to the Tower of the 100 and the Tower of Hananiel, they dedicated it." I want to talk for just a little while from the subject, business as unusual. Business as unusual. We're currently in a series entitled, Let's Build Something Together. And we've been journeying through the book of Nehemiah. And today I just want to talk for a brief amount of time from the subject, business as unusual. You may be seated. A couple of years ago, I read a book by Super Bowl winning coach Tony Dungy. The name of the book is called The Soul of a Team. The premises of the book is quite simple. The premises is, in order to be a winning and successful team, your team has to have soul. Coach Dungy attests that soul, S-O-U-L, is an acronym for selflessness, ownership, unity, and a larger purpose. Amazingly, when I was going through chapter 3 of Nehemiah, I discovered that the team that Nehemiah recruited to rebuild the wall had soul. As they were rebuilding the wall that they were recruited to build, they displayed soul. They displayed selflessness, ownership, unity, and a larger purpose. As a matter of fact, they did it in a way that showed us that it was business not as usual, but business as unusual. And 3 elements made it so. They are dedication, delegation, and diversity. It'll make sense after a while. Now, the last time we were together, Nehemiah had stood up and proclaimed to the enemy that the God of heaven would prosper us, and we, his children, will arise and build. The last time we were together, we saw Nehemiah stand up to the enemy and declare the God of heaven would prosper us, and we, his children, will arise and rebuild. And now in Nehemiah chapter 3, that is exactly what they're doing. They have rose and they are rebuilding. And watch this, they're doing it with soul. They're doing it while demonstrating selflessness, ownership, unity, and a larger purpose. They're doing it with soul. They had been recruited by Nehemiah to rebuild the wall. And that is exactly what they were doing in Nehemiah chapter 3. They were rebuilding the wall. And here's what we have to see. They executed the plan regardless of the persecution, because they were determined to do what God had equipped and empowered them to do. Let me hit rewind and say that again. They executed the plan regardless of the persecution. So in chapter 3, they executed the plan regardless of the persecution that took place in chapter 2. And the reason why they did it was because they were determined to do what God had equipped and empowered them to do. That's wise stewardship. Anytime I do what I'm supposed to do with what God has empowered me with and equipped me with, that is wise stewardship. They were being wise stewards over that in which God had equipped them and empowered them to do. In 2020, the COVID-19 pandemic came in like a flood, and it put pause on everything that we knew to be normal. In 2020, COVID came in like a flood and put pause on everything that we knew as normal. Not only that, but it prevented the city, community, country, and even the church from doing business as usual. It came in like a flood, pushed pause on everything we knew to be normal, and it prevented the church, the city, the community, and the country from doing business as usual. It was what Dr. Tony Evans calls a divine disruption. That's what COVID-19 was. It was a divine disruption meant to force us into a place where we would no longer do things the same. Here it is. It was a divine disruption that was meant to cause a divine reset. It was meant to put us in a position so that we would do things differently. Because if we always do what we've always done, we'll always see what we've always seen. It was a divine disruption meant to cause a divine reset. Now watch this. In Nehemiah chapter 3, the walls are tore down. The gates are tore down. The people had been in captivity. The temple had been destroyed. And what you need to see is all of those things took place because it too was a divine disruption. And it was a divine disruption meant to cause a divine reset. And Nehemiah knew it. It's going to make sense in a minute. Nehemiah picked up on it. He knew that it was a divine disruption meant to cause a divine reset. And here's how I know that he knew. When they started working on the project, look who he starts with. I'm in verse 1 of chapter 3. It says, the high priest Eliashib and his fellow priests began rebuilding the sheep gate. He started the project off with the high priest and his priests doing the work, because he understood that it was a divine reset. The reason why they had went into captivity, the reason why the walls and the gates had been tore down, the reason why the temple had been destroyed is because they were being disobedient and rebellious against God. So they were in the shape that they were in because they had been doing what they wanted to do. So God caused a divine disruption so that it would cause a divine reset. And Nehemiah understood it. So he starts the project off with the high priest and the priest rebuilding the sheep's gate, because he understood it was supposed to be a divine reset. Not only that, but when you look at verse 1 of chapter 3, you'll see that the phrase dedicated it is there twice. Remember, I told you at the beginning of this sermon that the L in the acronym SOUL stands for larger purpose. And the reason why they are dedicating it is because they realize that the wall was the work of God. It was God's wall and it was God's work. Therefore, it was tied into, quote unquote, a larger purpose. They were doing God's work. They connected the dots. So they dedicated it. But it gets better. Because not only did they dedicate the wall and the work unto God, there's also delegation. You see, Nehemiah, even back then, understood the need to delegate, because teamwork makes the dream work. He understood that even back then. He understood even back then that team itself is an acronym. It stands for together Everybody achieves more. So he delegates. He understands that he can't do it by himself. He understands that he needs a team. He understands that in order to get the work done, he doesn't just need the power of God, he needs the people of God. And here we are, thinking we can do it by ourselves. Not realizing that not only do I need the power of God to pull it off, I need the people of God to pull it off. I can't do it by myself. You can't do it by yourself. And some people are quick to say, all I need is the power of God, not realizing that the power of God flows through the people of God. We need a team. In case you forgot, what were they doing? They were rebuilding what the enemy had tore down. Let me say that again. They were rebuilding what the enemy had tore down. And they needed a team to do it. Who am I talking to? If your family is tore down, if your finances are tore down, if your friendships are tore down, if your marriage is tore down, if your mind or your ministry is tore down, you can't do it by yourself. You need a team. You need not just the power of God, but you need the people of God. Nehemiah realized that he needed a team. So we see dedication, we see delegation, but we also see diversity. I told you earlier that it was business as unusual because of the dedication, delegation, and the diversity. When you do a deep dive into Nehemiah chapter 3, you'll discover that the team he recruited were from all walks of life. It was, if you would, a smorgasbord of saints. There were all type of people on his team. Different crafts and from different towns. You had perfumers, priests, high priests, merchants, Levites, and even women on his team. It was a very diverse team. But watch this, their differences didn't cause division or disunity. If anything, their differences made them more effective rather than less effective. They were able to, because of their differences, complement one another rather than compete with one another. Their differences made them do the job better. They were different from the standpoint of background. They were different from the standpoint of personality. They were different from the standpoint of upbringing. They were different in careers. They were different in character. They were different all across the board, but the differences didn't cause division or disunity. The differences helped them to do the job and do it better. And here's what I've been alluring to. If we are going to do business as unusual and do something great for God, then everybody can't do everything and everybody can't be the same. Let me say that again. If we're going to do something great for God and if we're going to do business as unusual, then everybody can't be the same and everybody can't do everything. In other words, there has to be some delegation and diversity in order for us to do something great, in order for us to do business as unusual. There just can't be dedication, but there has to be delegation and diversity. Okay. The wall, and I'm done. The wall had been torn down for centuries. Let me say that again. The wall had been torn down for centuries. But it only took them 52 days to rebuild it. I'm going to give you time to catch up. It had been torn down for centuries. But it only took them 52 days to rebuild it. Here's the lesson. It doesn't matter how long your life has been broken down. It doesn't matter how long your life has been messed up. It doesn't matter how long it has been in the shape that it's in. It doesn't matter how long the marriage has been broken down. It doesn't matter how long the ministry has been broken down. It doesn't matter how long the relationship with that son or that daughter has been broken down. It doesn't matter how long the family has been broken down. It doesn't matter how long the finances has been broken down, the country, the city, the community. Can I say it? The church has been broken down. It doesn't matter how long it has been broken down. God can repair it and rebuild it in less time than it took for us to break it down. It doesn't matter how long it has been broken down. He can repair it and rebuild it in less time than it took for us to mess it up. And you know, some of us, we've took a lot of time to mess up our lives. But God sent me here to tell you and to tell myself it doesn't matter how long it's been broken down. He can repair it. He can rebuild it in less time than it took for us to mess it up.